Right, well, that's one of the many conundrums that stand away. Right. Is there a number two, or?
I don't know if it's number two. It's an important one, is the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. And I found it often to be a good tool to use. I remember one time I was at home, lazy Saturday afternoon, lying on the couch, and two smartly dressed young women came to the door. I could see them through the screen door. There's a rap, and I looked up. I figured they were Avon ladies. And I said, yeah, what do you want? They said, we're witnesses of Jehovah, and we'd like to share with you some gospel truths. I was up like that. I went to the door, and my wife was just putting on an early supper, and I said, you go ahead and eat, I've got work to do. So I went out on the porch, and I found out right away that one of the witnesses had been a former Methodist, and the other a former Catholic. So you know which one I zeroed in on. And I said to her, let's use your translation of the Bible, the New World Translation, and let's look at John 6. That's the chapter where, after our Lord multiplies miraculously loaves and fish, he promises the Eucharist. It says, if there's to be spiritual life within you, you must eat my flesh and drink my blood. He repeats that. And so I go through that with them, verse by verse through that chapter. And then I get to verse 64, and I say, people here, just said before this, people left Christ because they would not accept his teaching. The only place in Scripture where anybody leaves Jesus for a doctrinal reason. This is a hard saying. Who can accept it? And they walked with him no more. And I turned to her and said, I got real close. I said, do you know who else fell away here? Oh, it was Judas. Judas falls away here. Later on, he becomes a thief, stealing from the common purse. Later on, he becomes a betrayer. But first, he betrays Jesus in his heart and his mind because he refuses Jesus' teaching. Yeah. And she said, is that so? I didn't know that was there.
That's right.
It's one of those light bulb things. Yeah. When you point it out to somebody, you say, it's been there all the time. I never saw it.
Yeah. In fact, that's one of the books I keep thinking I'm going to write. The verses I never saw, because there's a list of them that, as Protestants, we just jumped over, either because we had a quick solution or we didn't. We just ignored it, or we had a knee-jerk answer.
But there are a lot of Protestant churches though where you never really get to the verses anyway, because the minister has his own favorite ones that he preaches from. Ronald Knox, who's one of our favorite writers, once commented that for most of Protestantism, it's 10% of Christianity that is soteriology, how you get saved. Where most of the rest of Christianity is glided over or not looked at. So when you go to some of these churches, you've got the same half dozen verses over and over again. You never get to John 6. And no one ever hears John 6 from the pulpit. And so I can understand why it's never made an impression.
I don't think I ever preached on it in my 10 years. Now, let's take the other side of this question as a Catholic apologist. In all areas of study, scholars are often looking for that one answer that will answer everything else. The physicists are looking for the unified theory that will explain quantum mechanics and wave, everything. Well, as an apologist, have you come up with the silver bullet, that one question that will cut to the heart of the issue?
Not so much one question, but maybe one technique. That's turning to the fathers of the church. I found over and over again, when either a Catholic or a Protestant starts to read the writings of the fathers, those who wrote in the first few centuries, they're both astounded that it's so obviously the Catholic faith that's being taught. It's so obvious. It's not an amorphous Christianity that somehow takes shape long after the Roman Empire is gone. It's from the first, second, third centuries already. A Catholic, when he reads the Fathers, as I did, looks up and says, here's the evidence I need. I mean, it's all there. There's a kind of pat on the back, Yeah, I'm in the right place. The Protestant, when he reads it, gets a shock because he finds that there's no early Luther, there's no early Calvin. They simply weren't there. These are bishops and popes and other saints writing about the Eucharist and confession and the other sacraments in almost modern terms.
As well as a hierarchical church.
Oh yeah. I mean, so to me, as I mentioned in my first book, Catholicism and Fundamentalism, I was going to use in that book scripture, logic, drawing inferences, and the early history of the church. That is what you get out of the fathers, mainly. Those are enough for the non-Catholic reader. In that book, I made a big point of not using as an authority any papal decree or any ecumenical council because a non-Catholic wouldn't accept them, right? Well, and I found since that book came out in 1988 that so many non-Catholic Christians have turned to the fathers of the church and just been astounded at what they found.
Especially I was impressed by the apostolic fathers particularly because those are the ones like
those are the earliest ones
that you know have a direct connect to Ignatius, the direct connect to the apostles.
They either themselves listened to the apostles or they were taught by someone who had.
That's right.
So you're almost one generation removed.
And what happens is, you have these different Christian groups that say that at some point very early everything got off base, and so when you read those, you push it back so far that either the apostles themselves had to get off.
That's right, because they must have the church must have apostatized, as some say, while most of the apostles are still alive. Is that possible?
Yeah, especially with what Jesus promised.
Exactly.
That pushes back to even not being able to trust Jesus. Why don't we take our first caller? I think we're ready for this. Hello.